Hey everyone out there in YouTube land, Dan here from Geekcast Radio doing another From the Long Box video where I get a comic from my collection and give you my thoughts and opinions on it and tell you how it shaped my fandom, or perhaps if it's a book I haven't read for the first time, give you my thoughts and opinions on it years after it was published. Today I'm actually talking about Captain America, #1. No, not to the Captain America #1 that's coming out on the 4th of July or other #1 Captain America. This is Captain America #1 from 2004, written by Ed Brubaker and Steve Epting. And many people, when they think of the Ed Brubaker series, they obviously think of Winter Soldier, which this eventually led to. And when I talked about Cable and Deadpool, I mentioned how that kind of helped get me back into comics in the early 2000s. And that was the first series I started reading. This was the second series. And a big reason for that is I am a Captain America fan, but first and foremost, I'm a huge history fan, especially World War II history. You might get that a lot from my dad, who loves World War II history. He knows a lot about it and kind of passed that down on to me. And when I was sold on this series, it mentioned that it kind of reimagined Captain America for a new generation in a way where they weren't changing the history of the character, but they were looking back at his history as a soldier and making it more tangible for the world. You know, this was coming out in 2004. We were in the midst of the Iraq War. This was coming in there. I think they were utilizing that idea of PSD, much more, during that period of time than we had in the past. And now it was kind of bleeding into the title of Captain America, and seeing his past not being as that kind of having that sheen over it that it would typically have. This idea of, he was this propaganda-esque type of figure at the time, but getting more into the nitty-gritty, showing us the details of kind of the horrors that he went through, and he becomes much more of a sympathetic figure. You see he is going through a lot. Him and Sharon Carter, their relationship is on the forefront within this series, and there's like this haunting feeling to him with much of what's going on. He's still, the Captain America of old, kicking soldiers' butts like he would ever want to. And Steve Epting I miss him doing Marvel books. Like we don't get enough of him doing Marvel books. He brought so much life to this and really established, I think, the feel for this series that it maintained. Even when Steve Epting wasn't on this book and they had a guest writer, they tend to stay within his type of style because they wanted to make the book as consistent as possible, which is a thing I don't really feel like happens that much anymore. One, we have changing artists much more today than we did a long time ago. But I was really, what I found interesting about this too was like it ends on, this is kind of a spoiler alert for a book that's 14 years old, but it ends with the death of Red Skull. And, I think he's back alive again and then dead again since then, as characters were. But it was interesting to see them take out Captain America's biggest foe right away. And it's like, okay, well, if Red Skull's dead, who did that and why? And why is that? And where is this exactly this is going? It's a very good opening cliffhanger. But this was also what I loved about it, too, is that it, in that page, you can see it brief into some of the history of Captain America, where he's been, from his early days as a soldier to his early days and becoming a hero for the Avengers, after being frozen from the ice. It just it had everything I wanted in a comic book. Man, also going through this Spider-Man 2. This was right when Spider-Man 2 was out. So I was, comic book fever was sweeping the nation, as they say. It says best comic book movie ever made, and honestly, for me, still Spider-Man 2 is the best superhero movie ever made. I know, better than Dark Knight. What are you gonna do? But that's irrelevant to this discussion. But again, another amazing Steve Epting being Steve Epting with the reflection of Red Skull and Captain America right there. Fantastic. But Captain America is one of those types of characters who can be often very unrelatable, too Boy Scoutish, where he doesn't really have much to him. It's just like one note when he's written by the wrong person. He seems, as I mentioned, a very mostly the propaganda-like figure. Ed Brubaker, I think, got into him a little bit more, got more into the psychology of Steve Rogers. And what's interesting about Steve Rogers is that his moral code is set. But what happens is, what makes him a complex and interesting character is, his goal is to do the right thing above all else, even if the right thing isn't popular, even if the right thing, depending on the situation, isn't legal, i.e. the Civil War. But what makes Ed Brubaker eventually did was by muddying the waters where you're not really sure what the right thing is exactly. Uh, Introducing Bucky eventually. This obviously was just kind of setting the stage, this first issue, of his voice for Captain America. And as I say, like, this is one of the early scenes that kind of got into the idea of, Captain America seeing fallen and dead soldiers, seeing him deal with a failure like that. Often, when Captain America's War 2 days are used in comics as him triumphing, him coming in to save the day. Here, he's seeing bodies laying on the ground. World War II was a brutal, brutal war. Millions of people lost their lives, and now we're seeing that kind of showcased in here, where that's still on his mind, and him wrestling with the fact if he's still a relevant character. This was also around the time where New Avengers was restarting, and I think it just set the stage, set kind of the Captain America that we still somewhat see today. Obviously, he's gone through a lot of different adventures with Nick Spencer taking over and doing the Stevel Hydra Cap type of situation. Now Mark Waid on his run, I think, is going to more of a classic type of Steve Rogers, where he's not, he isn't haunted by the past. He's not as a sympathetic figure, but I feel like that has worked for the most part because it's been so needed. Like, it was good to have that old style, and I thought by the end, the Out of Time storyline with Mark Waid, it got more into that element of Steve Rogers. But to me, is still the crowning achievement when it comes to Captain America titles, and it started here, and it picked us up, and it was, by the time I actually started reading it, it was on like the 4th or 5th issue. Went back and collected all the different books. Again, impressed by the art. Steve Epting is still a name. If I see in a book, even if it's a character that I don't care that all much about, I will probably pick it up and check it out and read it, just because I want to see him, and Ed Brubaker to this day right now is probably my favorite writer. It started with Captain America. I love right now, like Kill or Be Killed, The Fade Out. I love his noir take, and I miss him doing superheroes. I miss his run on things like Daredevil, but he just, I think, brought gravitas to superheroes that is sometimes missing. And I would love him to see him like take on superheroes once again. He's doing obviously a lot of creator-owned stuff right now. He's working, I think he's still writing for Westworld. But I think one thing that comics maybe needs is a name like him again, working for Marvel, working for DC. I think it'd be fantastic. Maybe not Captain America, because every time you try to recapture that same magic, it tends to fail. But giving him maybe a different character that he's never worked on before. But if you're a person who loved Captain America, Winter Soldier, love what that had going for it, this to me is, or even Captain America First Avenger, which is a little bit more adventurous than this. This is a great series to pick up, and start from issue number 1 and keep on going. Pick up the first volume. I know they sell Winter Soldier by itself as a trade paperback, and I think you miss a lot if you pick that up without reading some of these first issues first, because it builds up that story. As you saw at the end, we see Red Skull die, and for a very long time we didn't know who this person's shadowy figure was in the background. And when it was finally revealed, it was huge. I think it was, the internet wasn't what it is today, even but internet standards then. Ed Brubaker bringing back Bucky was sacrilegious in many people's eyes. The freakouts were huge. I think at the time I even was on like the Marvel message boards, and I remember just seeing post after post saying this is the worst thing. This is them just trying to cash grab. They're going to ruin the character forever. And I think eventually people kind of started reading it and realizing, you know what? This is actually really good. This isn't just good, it's great. And eventually now it's, I think most people rank Winter Soldier as the best Marvel movie. And this is one of the best Marvel Captain America's runs. I do feel like by the end, it did fizzle out. I did like it when Bucky Cap came in and he took over. He brought something new to the title. But once they brought Captain America back, it did feel like Ed Brubaker had an idea of where he wanted to take this title, but they were also making the Steve Rogers movie. And it was, to me, the first time where a book was possibly derailed because of the need to align with whatever the movies were doing. But first and foremost, so this is a great series. Also, it was getting to the point where, it was six. I forget how many issues exactly he ran it for, but he just kind of, I think, he didn't have a specific endpoint, and by the time that he finally gave it up, it wasn't to where it was when it first started. But the first, I would say, 50 issues or so are really good, and to me, still up there as my all-time favorite runs. Personally, to me, still the crowning achievement when it comes to all of the Captain America runs. I like what Mark Waid is doing, but that's a nice palate cleanser. It doesn't have the depth of something like Captain America, the 2004 series. So if you've been debating about checking it out, I'm trying to avoid spoilers for most of this, even though I kind of ruined it. But as I said, now Red Skull's back alive, so I guess it's not really spoiling anything. But if I'd be curious to hear what have those that have read this series. What were your thoughts and opinions on it? Have you read or watched Winter Soldier, and did you enjoy that? Did that get you at all inclined to go back and read the source material? People love the Marvel movies, but are they actually going back to read the comics? I'd be interested to see. So, and are you going to be picking up the new Captain America that starts on July 1st? I know I will. I want to test it out. I'm hesitant because I didn't love what Ta-Nehisi Coates was doing with Black Panther, though the relaunch kind of brought me back in. So I'm hoping he can really nail it out of the park when it comes to Captain America. We'll see. Will it be as good as this number one? Only time will tell. But for now, remember that comics are for everyone. The key is finding the right one. Until next time, thanks for watching. Bye, everybody.